What's going on, guys? Welcome back. And seen as the final installment in the Thrawn series, Thrawn Ascendancy Lesser Evil, released yesterday, I think I now have a really solid idea as to what the best order is in which to read and watch Thrawn. Now, there are 6 books in the canon Thrawn series now, and there are 2 seasons of Star Wars Rebels where his character is present. And they were all of these books and these seasons of Rebels were released in a different order. But I feel like, reading it in chronological order is kind of boring, and you kind of spoil some of the twists for yourself that occur in later stories. So I feel like I have compiled the best possible order in which to read and watch the story of Thrawn if you're unfamiliar with his character and if you want to get into the Thrawn series. I feel like this is the best possible order in which to read and watch them. I read and watched them for the first time in a different order, but I got my dad into the series and I read the books to him and we watched Rebels together, and I tried out this particular order, and I feel like it's the most engaging order in which to read and watch the story of Thrawn. Now, I will kind of put a little disclaimer here at the beginning, is that I will kind of talk about particular plot points that are within the books, but I'm not going to spoil anything super specific. But there may be mild spoilers, just warning you in case you don't want to get spoiled on anything and if you want to get into the Thrawn series. But with that said, let's get into the best order in which to read and watch Thrawn. Now, starting off, the first book you're going to want to read is Thrawn from 2017. Now, this is a precursor to Thrawn's appearance in Rebels, and it's just a good introduction to Thrawn's character because it is through the perspective of the Empire, which is something as a Star Wars fan you are familiar with, whether or not you are familiar with Thrawn's character. So, the Empire's learning more about Thrawn, and the character Eli Vanto, who is within the Empire, is learning about Thrawn, and as he's learning about Thrawn, you are learning about Thrawn through him. He's kind of the audience character. And as the book goes along, you kind of get multiple little hints and such as to Thrawn's origins, and I think it's just a good kind of jumping off point. It also introduces you to the character of Arianda Price, who is also an antagonist in Star Wars Rebels. I feel like it's just a really good stepping off point and kind of sets up a lot of intrigue as to what's going on with Thrawn's character. Now, after reading the first Thrawn book, you are going to want to jump immediately into Star Wars Rebels Season 3. At the beginning of Season 3 of Rebels, Thrawn gets introduced to the characters within that show, and he does briefly reference the events that happened at the end of the first Thrawn book, and does reinforce the idea that this does take place directly after the events of the first Thrawn book, so you get to see what's going on with him. Now, if you get into it and you enjoy Rebels, you can watch the entirety of the season, but seeing as this is a Thrawn-specific list and order in which to read and watch Thrawn, I'm going to just kind of list off the episodes that I feel are necessary and are the most Thrawn-centric and important to understanding his story. The first 2 episodes I would recommend watching. Thrawn isn't in them very much, but it does kind of contain his introduction, and it's kind of important in that regard. Then I would say watch the 5th episode because you get a reinforcement of his intelligence and, skills. And then in the 10th episode, you kind of get a little bit of a hint as to this mysterious project that Thrawn is working on that becomes a very important plot element later on in Rebels and in the rest of the books. Then episode 17 is also pretty important because it does kind of contain a rather dramatic shift in the storyline of Thrawn versus the Rebels. And then, of course, the finale, the 2-part finale, episodes 21 and 22, are also very important and lead directly into the events of the Thrawn Alliances book. So you can just watch all of those episodes unhindered. If you want to watch more than that, obviously that's fine. There are some really good episodes of Rebels that I'm not mentioning, but these are just kind of the ones that I feel are a necessity if you want to get a good idea of what's going on with Thrawn's story at this point in time. Now, once you finish Star Wars Rebels Season 3, or at least the episodes that Thrawn is in Star Wars Rebels Season 3, you're going to want to jump back, kind of into the past, to Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising. Now, this is the first of the Thrawn prequel trilogy, and it introduces you to the world of the Ascendancy, obviously Thrawn's society. It deepens Thrawn's character significantly, and you kind of start to see some elements that were alluded to in the first Thrawn book. For example, the relationship between Thrawn and Anakin is kind of, you start to see that take form a little bit in this first book, and that is explored a lot in the next book. I feel like it's just kind of a good continuation of what you saw before. You're going to go back into the past and learn more about Thrawn's past and the history, and you kind of see his world for the first time. So I feel like it's a good next step and logical next step in the order of Thrawn's story. Now, this is where things start to kind of jump around a little bit, and they start to get a little bit weird. You're going to want to jump back to the direct sequel to the 2017 Thrawn book, and that is Thrawn Alliances. Now, what's weird about this book is that it's split into two separate plot lines. We have one in the past with Anakin and Thrawn, and one in the present with Vader and Thrawn, and they're both going on very similar missions. But the stuff with Anakin and Thrawn is kind of led into directly by Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising, and you even see the same scene from Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising just from a different perspective. So it kind of is a nice lead-in from that last book, and you also have the events in current time, which take place directly after the finale of Star Wars Rebels Season 3, and you see what kind of an effect those events have had on Thrawn's character. I feel like it just kind of is a logical sequel and next step from Rebels Season 3 and Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising. Then, after Thrawn Alliances, you're going to want to go back into the past once again to Thrawn Ascendancy Greater Good. Now, this one is obviously the sequel to Thrawn Ascendancy Chaos Rising, but it does show the direct aftermath of what happened, well, not only in that book, but also what happened in Thrawn Alliances, and it continues the story from that point. You know, it's just kind of the logical continuation of that story. There's not really a lot to say in that regard. It's my favorite Thrawn book, but in regards to the story, I don't want to spoil anything, of course, but it's just the logical next step in the story of Thrawn. Now, following Thrawn Ascendancy Greater Good, you're going to want to jump right into the next installment in the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, and that is Thrawn Ascendancy Lesser Evil. Now, I have not technically finished reading this book as of the time I am recording this video, but based on how far I am into the book, I feel like this is the best next step in the story of Thrawn. It picks up directly where Thrawn Ascendancy Greater Good leaves off, and I feel like it's just a logical continuation of Thrawn's story, and at least at this point in time, I don't think it would fit anywhere else in the viewing and reading order. Now, this is where things get really, really weird. Now, that is because the final book, Thrawn Treason, and Star Wars Rebels Season 4 kind of almost take place congruently, like they basically take place at the same time. Now, what I'd recommend doing is watching the episodes that I would recommend to you right now. Obviously, if you're just into the show in general, you can watch all of them. But once again, if you're just looking for the Thrawn-centric episodes, I would recommend just watching episodes 6, 7, 9, and 10. Now, there is a scene that takes place about midway through episode 10 of Star Wars Rebels Season 4 that is the introductory chapter to Thrawn Treason, the final book in the series, at least in this order. And what I would recommend doing at that point is once you finish the 10th episode, start reading Thrawn Treason, and then continue watching Star Wars Rebels until you get to the final episode, because the cliffhanger ending of Thrawn Treason leads directly into the finale of Star Wars Rebels, and if you're just reading these without knowing what happens, you don't really want to spoil yourself on the events that take place in that finale. So I would say, watch Star Wars Rebels Season 4 up until the end of the 10th episode, then start reading Thrawn Treason, then read and watch them almost, like, congruently, and then pause once you get to the 15th episode of Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, then finish Thrawn Treason, and then watch the finale of Star Wars Rebels. That's the best order I can give, because the events of Thrawn Treason take place congruently with Rebels Season 4, and they the ending of that book leads directly into the finale of Star Wars Rebels. Now, with all that said, that's pretty much it on what I believe to be the definitive order in which to, read and watch and just experience the story of Thrawn. I doubt any of you watching this video are as engaged in this story as I am, but I'm sure some of you are interested in, reading the story and just don't know what the best order is in which to do that, and I'm sure some of you have already read the story, perhaps, and are just interested in a different order in which to experience it, which is also fine. I didn't experience this story in this order. I read the books in a different order, and then my dad showed interest in the story, so I wanted to get him into it, so I read in the books, and we watched the series together in this exact order, and I feel like it's the most engaging way in which to experience the story. All the twists and turns are kept intact. You get to see the story from a multitude of different perspectives, and it's more fresh than if you were to just read all of the books in each of the trilogies in order, and you would just kind of be stuck in a particular time period for an extended amount of time, and it might get boring. But with this order, you're jumping around a little bit, you're experiencing different aspects of the story, learning different elements about each of the characters from different points in time, and it's the most engaging experience I had with the story. So, with all that said, that's pretty much all I have to say here. You guys please let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Are you going to read the Thrawn series? Have you already read it? And if not, what order are you going to read it in? Just whatever your thoughts are, please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care.